Welcome to Brainbox. Let's try to understand now how to control fire. See, in previous sessions, we clearly understood that given fuel has to undergo combustion means for the fuel, what are the necessary requirements? That the fuel requires the oxygen because oxygen is a supporter of combustion, and moreover, it requires the ignition temperature, right? So, whenever fire accidents happen, we need to cut off supply of oxygen. Okay, this is one thing what we can do so that we can control the fire, right? And the another thing what we can do is lower the temperature. Lower temperature so that we can reduce, means the ignition temperature is required, right? For the given fuel to burn, a temperature which is more than ignition temperature is required, so that if at all we reduce the temperatures of the given fuel, it cannot undergo combustion, right? So these are the two things what are required to control the fire. But how can we do these things? See, have you ever seen the fire brigade vehicles controlling the fire? They'll be throwing a large quantities of water, right? So what happens? So when water is thrown, so we use water to do the both, right? So how water can do the both? First thing, water is having high specific heat. The specific heat of water is very high. Now what do you understand about the word specific heat? It can absorb large amount of heat energy to lower the temperature or to rise the temperature. So large amount of heat energy can be absorbed so that the surroundings can be cooled very fastly if at all we throw water, right? So as because of high specific heat lowers the temperature fastly. Okay, so this is one way, means when we throw the water or when we pour more water on the flames, at that case water has high specific heat. Because of that, it absorbs large amounts of heat so that it lowers the temperature fastly. So that the second requirement, what are the two requirements for the combustion? One is oxygen and one more is ignition temperature. So the ignition temperature will be given off, means will be inhaled, right? Now the next thing what we require here is that oxygen supply. We need to cut off the oxygen supply. Now the water, whichever the water we have thrown, will be forming the water vapor, will be converted into water vapor, and the vapor cut off the supply, means vapor forms a blanket around fuel and cuts off oxygen supply, right? So what do you understand from this? Normally we can use water to cut off the fire, right? Means to control the fire, water can be used. Water works in both the ways, because to control a fire, what basically we require is we need to cut off the oxygen supply, we need to lower the temperature. The requirements of that should be removed, right? Now the two requirements are oxygen, ignition temperature. So if at all we lower the temperature so that the fuel cannot reach its ignition temperature, so that it cannot burn, and at the same time the water vapor which we have used, that will be forming a blanket like layer around the fuel so that it cuts off the oxygen supply, right? So that either of these things can control the fire, but by throwing water we are doing the both, right? But anyway, in some cases there are some exceptional cases where we should not use water for controlling fire. So what are the exceptional cases? If the control, means whatever the fire is due to electric circuit, short circuit, fire is due to electric short circuit. So in this case we must not use water to cut off the fire. That is the reason here is water will act as a conductor of electricity so that it may lead to electric shocks, right? So if the fire is raised because of electric short circuit, in such case, to control the fire, we should not use water, right? And if oils are some flames are present, so are present, okay, in such cases we again should not use water. That is because the reason here is the oils are lighter than water, so that on water they start floating and they continue to undergo combustion. We just need to cut off the supply of oxygen. But anyway, if the fuel is something like oil, in such cases water cannot cut off the supply of oxygen because water is more denser than oil. And what happens if at all we use oil? Oil will be floating on water and it still can catch oxygen and can undergo combustion, right? Now, in these cases, how to control fire? Now, CO2 can be used as fire extinguisher. So the substance which can put off the fire is called as fire extinguisher in such cases. So in these cases, means if the fire is raised either due to electric short circuit or if oils are present as fuels, then okay. So in both these cases, whenever fire is either due to electric short circuit or the fuels are something like oils, in both these cases, what we need to do, instead of using water as a fire extinguisher, use carbon dioxide as a fire extinguisher. Instead of carbon dioxide, we can even use some substances like CCl4, which means to say that carbon tetrachloride. Right, now most of the time we used to use a carbon dioxide only as a fire extinguisher, and the sources of carbon dioxide means from where we can produce means the chemicals like sodium bicarbonate, sodium and potassium bicarbonates. So the formulas of these two things are like NaHCO3 or KHCO. We can use these compounds to produce the carbon dioxide, to generate the carbon dioxide instantly, so that we can use them as a fire extinguishers, right? So what do you understand from this overall? The requirements for the fire combustion is that oxygen and ignition temperature. If at all we are able to cut off these two things, then we can put off the fire. Right? How to cut off these two things? Then first thing is we need to lower the surrounding temperature. When the combustion is going on, surroundings temperature must be lowered, and we need to cover the supply or put off the supply of oxygen to the given fuel. Right? Means avoid contact between fuel and oxygen. Now for this, the best method is to throw water on that. Right? So when we are throwing water, ultimately the temperature will be lowered fastly, and moreover the water covers the whole fuel as a water vapor in the form of water vapor, so that the oxygen supply to the fuel will be removed, right? So that the fuel can means combustion or the flame can be controlled very fastly. But anyway, water is not best in all the cases. Water is definitely the best fire extinguisher, but it is not in all cases. So these are the exceptional cases where we cannot use water as a fire extinguisher. So what are the cases? Where the flame is or fire is due to electric short circuit, or if oils are present in the flame, right? So in either of these cases, instead of water, carbon dioxide should be used as a fire extinguisher. Now if at all we use carbon dioxide, then what are the sources from where we can get the carbon dioxide? We can get them by heating sodium or potassium bicarbonates. Got it? Have a look.